We were talking about Hades earlier, and I did have some people say that Hades was great, and I had some people ask, like, what do I think in regards to, like, Hades versus Dead Cells? And the first part of it was the difficulty. Even though I didn't save the graph, I feel so sad about it. We had two colors. We had purple for Dead Cells, red for Hades. Dead Cells kind of starts off like here, then it curves upward, and then it just gradually goes up until it starts to like taper off a little bit, but it keeps going up. Like, it never becomes like a completely easy clap game because they keep doing updates, and as they keep doing updates, like, the game changes and the difficulty changes in different ways. I feel like Hades starts off like this, and then it goes down, and then it starts to curve up and up and up at like a higher trajectory, than Dead Cells. And what this is this is like 0 BC right here, and then this is 1 BC, and then 2 BC, 3 BC, 4, and then it just keeps going like up and up. Hades, however, this is like 0 heat, 3 heat, 6. Yeah, I'd say this is like a 12. 16 is when it starts ramping up, and then obviously you get into like 24. And obviously that's like a really steep curve. It's probably not quite like that. But up here, this is like world first territory, where like the only people even playing this game want it to be this hard. Whereas like everyone's kind of like on this path for Dead Cells. And not to say that any one difficulty is better than the other, but it's just the way it is. And some people like to be right here, and they don't want to go for world first. Some people don't like their game being like hard at the start. They want to have, in Hades at least, they want stuff like the triple dashes and all that stuff like at the beginning of the game, and not like at this point, where the more you unlock the mirror, the easier the game gets. And then all of a sudden you do the Pact of Punishment, and now the game is ramping up again, compared to Dead Cells, where you're always on an upward trajectory. You would say that the bottom is around 5 to 8, and it starts to creep up and then take an elevator at 40. Yeah, I would be okay with that, especially if you do like, I don't remember how much heat is EM4. I think EM4 is a total of 12 heat, but correct me on that if I'm wrong. And obviously that's like a big swing up, so it's like, it's depends on how you allocate the heat as well. Yeah, so when it comes to Hades, I actually think that combat-wise, the games are almost like kind of similar in what is required to actually beat games. And there's no winners or losers in any of this. I'm not really speaking to which one is the better roguelike. They actually both won Action Game of the Year. Dead Cells won last year, and Hades won this year for Game Awards. So like, Hades has an emphasis on like mechanical execution. Like, a lot of people ask me, like, is it a game that's fun to play? And I like to compare it differently from Gungeon, Slay the Spire, and any stuff like that. It's just mechanical execution is huge in this game. And Dead Cells is the same way. Like, you look at Dead Cells and you get stuff like this giant fight where like you have to dodge attacks, you have to place your turret properly, you have to actually hit the eye because the character is moving all over the screen. And it's not like Gungeon or Isaac, where like you could just get a busted item and you don't have to do anything because the boss just vanishes. Like, you get whatever the dog's head is that does like a 360 degree attack in Binding of Isaac, and you have laser beams and you just walk up to the heart, press the dog's head, and the heart vanishes. There's nothing like that in Hades or Dead Cells. It's all about execution. So I feel like both games have that. Now, story-wise, obviously you can say that Dead Cells may not have quite as much story as Hades does. Hades has like 1,000 hours of recorded conversation, which I think is like non-existent in really any roguelike, as far as I know. That is something that if there is a winner or loser, there's no winners or losers here, but Hades kind of like takes that. And Dead Cells does try to have some reasoning to it, which is awesome. It has a nice little hook at the end that gets players excited about being the game. 1,000 voice lines, not hours. Thank you, Beebs. Thank you for the fact check. I didn't pick up Dead Cells because I thought I was gonna get mind-blowing story. I just wanted that universe, those kinds of monsters, those kinds of weapons, and then that kind of gameplay. Graphically, I mean, I don't really like to talk about graphics too much. I know there's people out there who are like, if you talk about graphics in games, that's, you know, that's not what gaming's all about. It's just, you know, some of the best games are still 16-bit games and stuff like that. The character design in Hades is actually really cool. Some of the stuff in Hades, though, gets a little hard to see, especially when you're on like forced overtime maxed out with multiple enemies, jury summons maxed out. Let's get to Elysium. Elysium is by far the worst one of the bunch. It's probably frustrating for some people when you get a room full of chariots plus shielded enemies, and you don't have a way to kill them because you're playing melee. Like that gets a little rough. And Dead Cells sometimes has that. But they've done a couple of changes, like this room in particular, where you have 2 chariots, 4 spearmen, and this isn't even maxed out jury summons. And the only thing in Dead Cells that might be equivalent to that is like Forgotten Sepulchre, where you have a hallway full of rats, knife throwers, maybe there's a masker so you can't see anything. Like, I guess that still exists, but I feel like clarity, like visual clarity in game, I sometimes find it easier in Dead Cells, but maybe that's because I have a lot of hours in Dead Cells. And in that case, it's not a matter of like Dead Cells is better in terms of clarity. It's just once you get used to stuff, maybe it's easier to get used to Dead Cells first. Then again, like low heat Hades, where you only have a couple monsters on the screen, it's not that bad. Yeah, maybe when you get back to this is like a visual clarity meter too, where it's like maybe these are reversed. The curve for Dead Cells is still gradual, whereas the visual curve for Hades might be a little rough. But I guess once you get up here and you understand the game anyway, it might taper off. More ways to frustrate and punish the player than Dead Cells. Yeah, and that might be just like from 16 and onward. But that might be why a lot of people may not go past 16. Maybe they get their one Skelly statue and call it a day. Build variety. Some people, like YouTuber wise, I've talked to a couple people who, once they see like every weapon and every aspect, then they don't really do more than that. Like as soon as you've seen Rama bow with Doom on the triangle and Artemis on the square, like why play any other version of Rama bow? You've already done like the best of the best, assuming that's like your favorite version of it. And I guess you multiply that for every weapon in the game. And maybe there's a couple of variants out there, like Beowulf is a good example, where Beowulf shield, you have all of those different options of cast to use. But like, are you gonna use Zeus on the cast and expect to get like heat 40? Maybe not. So there's some aspects that do very well with some stuff, and some that maybe they don't do as well with certain Olympians. And that might be by design. So like Demeter Fist, I always take Demeter with Demeter Fist for the uppercut, but some people do Artemis on the uppercut. I've seen some people do Aphrodite for the uppercut. So you get like multiple charm chances, and like if you get bonus damage to weakened target. But then when you talk about build variety for Dead Cells, we're doing viewer submitted builds. We have like 30 something viewer submitted builds that are almost all different. And that's not even all the available builds. There's just so many in Dead Cells, plus DLC coming out. It's almost like in the Isaac Gungeon territory, where it's like the game is fun because there's just a ton of items and you don't know what item you're gonna get. And you can play custom mode if you want to use a certain item. Hades maybe doesn't have that variety to it, but the run itself is the variety. And you just try to like path to the build that you think wins the run. Compared to Dead Cells, where it's like, I want to play Electric Whip with Ice Shards. Or I want to play Backstab Assassin Dagger Blowgun with a Phaser. That's probably legit. A power creep, item combos, and Hades. And there's decent combos with everything in almost everything in Dead Cells. I can see that. I think the power creep part only comes to people who wanna like climb up, and I've seen them do patches where they buffed certain items in Hades and nerfed other ones for the like upper tiers of players. And Dead Cells has that too. They've nerfed stuff in Dead Cells. We used to have double of the same item equipped, where you could rock double kunai or double boomerang, and that was actually giga busted, and now they took that out and you have to build what you think is gonna be the right move. Dead Cells is continuing to update. I actually think I read that Supergiant Games doesn't really release new content for their older games. A lot of people have been wondering, like, will we see Hades DLC? Will we see new biomes? Will we see alternate bosses and stuff like that? And I think the overall sentiment is no. We probably won't. And they could throw us a curveball. Like, I'm pretty sure people didn't think we would see stuff for Hollow Knight, and here it is. So I'm sure it's not out the window. But Dead Cells, however, updates a lot. Some would even think too much. But I actually like the idea of updating these games. It's not so much of, you know, the game gets stale and I don't want to play it anymore. It's just that if the devs have like a grand vision of stuff that could be in the game. Say for example, and someone in chat came up with this idea, I didn't, but if they wanted to add new bosses and only new bosses centered around Greek mythology, they could probably do that. It may not need like all kinds of new lore tied to it, but because it's Supergiant, they might be compelled to do that. Compared to Dead Cells, where it's like, you all want a katana, here you go. Just like plop it down, we don't care where it came from, as long as it works and it doesn't bug out. Supergiant hasn't done DLC or sequels on any games. Hades was such a huge success that they should make an exception. I agree. Some devs like don't want to just put out a product just to say they did it. They want it to actually have purpose and like proper design behind it. And I can see Supergiant as a team where they don't want to just give you something mediocre, like Katana. They don't want to just give Zagreus a random katana. They want to give you a reason why. I do want to thank everyone for hanging out, though. I know we don't really just talk on camera when it's not just like tier list content, but I would love to like be able to just chat in between games a little more often. And I definitely appreciate you all lending me your ear. Even if it goes in one ear and out the other, at least I know that it tickled a brain cell somewhere. Maybe. Hopefully.